Andrew McCutchen's season is done, but it doesn't mean his Pirates career is done.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast, everybody. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. I am a loyal Pittsburgh Pirates fan who brings you insight and positive analysis of the Pittsburgh Pirates every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Get to them later. Thank you for also making us your first listen of the day every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And we got some news yesterday that was not news that any Pirates fan wanted to hear. Of course, Andrew McCutchen, after sustaining an injury on Monday against the Milwaukee Brewers, is done for the 2023 season. And it's unfortunate because he tweeted out that he was fine. I said on Tuesday's show that I believed him. I thought that he was fine. He obviously tweeted again saying, I guess I'm not fine. But yeah, I even stated, though, on Tuesday that players will say they're fine, and sometimes they just aren't. And in this case, Andrew McCutchen is not. There would be a chance if this happened earlier in the season that Andrew McCutchen would have a chance to come back, but with it being so late in the year, now that we're about almost midway through September, his season's done. And it was a partial tear of his Achilles on Monday when he was legging out a double against the Brewers. He came up limping a little bit. It seemed like he was going to at least be out for maybe a week, but he goes on the 10-day IL. He's going to be in a walking boot for 6 weeks, which is the part that effectively ends his season, unless the Pittsburgh Pirates make a miraculous playoff run that isn't happening this year, sadly. And Todd Tomczyk said surgery for Andrew McCutchen is not likely, which is the biggest part of this, I think, that you could take away as a positive, is that he will mostly have a full healthy offseason and be able to come back for 2024 if he chooses, which is what we're going to talk about here in just a moment about that. But Kutch ends his season, and it was a milestone year for Andrew McCutchen coming back to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Of course, had not been with the team since being traded to the San Francisco Giants, had stints in Philadelphia, had stints in New York, had stints in Milwaukee, effectively makes the decision to come back to Pittsburgh where he wants to finish his career, and got a lot of milestones in the process this year. He ends the season with a 256 average, his best average since 2019. He had a 378 on-base percentage and ranked very highly among expected on-base percentage. I believe he was in the top 10 among some of baseball's best, and he was the team leader in on-base percentage, to no one's surprise. Andrew McCutchen is a phenomenal player at the plate in terms of getting on base via the free pass, not swinging at pitches that are out of the zone. These are all things we know about Andrew McCutchen by now in the long tenure that we've seen him as a Pittsburgh Pirate. He also ended the year with 12 home runs and 43 RBIs. He tallied his 2,000th hit this year, which we got to see, obviously, as a Pittsburgh Pirate. He got his 1,000th walk, which was another big one, and his 400th double. So again, a very big milestone season for Andrew McCutchen that you can't be upset about whatsoever. I mean, there was arguments that he had his best season since 2018 this season, and he was one home run shy of 300 on his career. And that was kind of the milestone that we kept watching over the last couple of weeks. Was he going to hit 300 this year and potentially go into next year not having to worry about it? Well, now he'll have to wait for next season to eventually hit that milestone of 300 home runs on his career. And the biggest question that comes from all this is, would Kutch be back next year. And there are varying opinions on this. Of course, Kutch going into next season is going to be 37 years old. So he's not the young McCutchen anymore. He's not flying around the bases like he used to. He still does, but he's not doing it at the level that he used to anymore. And I think the answer, at least from my standpoint on this, now obviously myself and any person who covers the Pirates has no say on if Andrew McCutchen is going to come back. That is all up to Andrew McCutchen. I still think he comes back next year, though. And he's expressed in multiple ways why I think this season was not it for him. And he's expressed pretty clearly, if you look at how he's talked, that 2023 was not a farewell season for him. He did not want this to be the curtain call. And he wants to retire in Pittsburgh. Now, the interesting thing that comes up with this, that's something we'll have to follow through the offseason, is Kutch will have to sign a new deal. He was only brought in on a 1-year, $5 million deal this year. And I think that's probably going to be what you see from Andrew McCutchen for however long he decides to play, be it through 2024, even 2025, if he wants to come back that late. I think it's just going to be 1-year deal, play out the year, come back in the offseason, see how you feel. Do you want to sign again? I think that's basically what is going to happen contract negotiation-wise between Andrew McCutchen and the team moving forward throughout the rest of his career, because they want to make sure, one, that he is not at a point where he's just not enjoyable to watch anymore and not up to par with how he wants to play baseball, and two, that he can actually make an impact on this team, which he did this year. He made an impact on this team whether we like it or not, which we all like it, obviously. And at 36, he's obviously not the 2013 NL MVP that we saw in Pittsburgh that led the Pirates to 3 straight postseason appearances and haven't made it since. But he's still a very productive player. I mean, you heard the on-base percentage. You heard the average. The home runs were there. He was getting extra base hits. Now, something next year that I would like to see Kutch do just a little bit more is maybe play the outfield here and there to let Henry Davis also DH and keep his bat in the lineup, seeing as Henry Davis has struggled as a right fielder. And if Kutch doesn't want to play right field or can't play right field, there's a possibility the Pirates have to look elsewhere to find a right fielder, because I don't know if Henry Davis can play that position long term. But that's another conversation for another day. Kutch also expressed this about returning in 2024 to reporters. That's the expectation, right? I vocalized that plenty of times about wanting to be here. I'm not going to feel right anywhere else, McCutchen said. At the end of the day, I have to make the right decisions for myself and for my family. Whatever happens here in the future, it's indicative of that. I'm going to rehab this, let this heal. Then when it's time to get moving again, I get moving again. We'll see where we go from there. So that's pretty much the sentiment that Kutch is going to have about this. He's going to rehab this as soon as the walking boot comes off. He's going to work through the beginning parts of the offseason rehabbing it, and then I'm sure sometime in December or January we probably get a 1-year, $5 million deal again, or just some arbitrary number that doesn't really matter in terms of it being a 1-year deal. But to make one thing clear, because I remember during the trade deadline, there was talks about this. Andrew McCutchen is going nowhere. That is something that I could say with 100% honesty, 100% confidence, that Andrew McCutchen is going absolutely nowhere outside of Pittsburgh. Let's remember, it was talked about that he might go to the Texas Rangers during the trade deadline. He still ended up staying in Pittsburgh. I don't think McCutchen or the Pirates have any interest in a breakup in any way until Andrew McCutchen decides to hang up his cleats and ride off into the sunset as a Pittsburgh Pirates legend. That's just what I think is going to happen. And the biggest part of what McCutchen was able to do this year was be an integral part in being a mentor to this young core of Pirates that is trying to get back to the postseason for the first time since 2015. It has been nearly a decade now since the Pirates have played postseason baseball, and McCutchen was the leader of the last teams that did it. So he's trying to be a mentor to these young guys, and I think he's doing a very, very good job. And I fully expect Andrew McCutchen to return and do just that again in 2024 at age 37. Again, the injury is unfortunate. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery from it. We'll see what happens with Kutch moving forward, and we'll be covering it here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. And before we get to the Pirates playing spoiler against the Milwaukee Brewers, I want to talk to you guys about eBay Motors. eBay Motors, of course, is your one place to get all the parts you need, because for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you stop or shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll get right back into the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast, everybody. Thank you so much for making Locked On Pirates your first listen of the day every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. And by the way, your Pittsburgh Pirates have been playing some very good baseball as of late, as I talked about on Tuesday. And they decided to have a comeback victory against the Milwaukee Brewers on Wednesday afternoon to win their third consecutive series. Remember that Tuesday show? Go watch it. It was fun. I told about the Pirates playing good baseball. And it's nice to see them do that against a practically playoff team. I don't think the Brewers are going to miss the playoffs. There are some implications to the Pirates winning the series that are very interesting about a certain series that ends the season, not for the Pirates, by the way, but I'll talk about it shortly. Pittsburgh, by the way, rallied in the seventh inning on Wednesday to defeat the Brewers. It was a very fun inning. I watched it back. I was at work, and I rewatched the entire game when I got home. And that Ji-Hwan Bae triple was it was so nice to see. The ball rolled all the way to the wall. Ji-Hwan Bae gets the third. Jason DeLay gets home. They take the 4-3 advantage. Miguel Andujar followed suit with a single to make it 5-3. David Bednar, of course, gets the save, winning the game 5-4. And this all came after the Pirates were trailing 3-0 after the first inning. I mean, Willy Adames had the 3-run home run in the top of the first inning, and it looked like the Brewers were going to cruise to a victory, but the Pirates just kept chipping back and chipping back. And that's the one thing that I think we can all say about this Pirates team is they fight for wins, man. They will sit there and they will find ways that otherwise you wouldn't think they would win. And this was one of those games. I mean, they had no business really winning this game. If Milwaukee's offense would have stayed hot like it did in the first inning, this game would have been over very quickly. But the Pirates settled in. They didn't let it seem like an insurmountable lead like it felt 3 months ago when they were down 3-0. And they came back and won. And it was their 33rd come-from-behind victory of the season, which ranks 13th in baseball. So they've been an average team in terms of coming back from deficits. I believe they were tied with the Mets and just behind the Cubs. We all know the Cincinnati Reds story right now about how they've been coming back in ball games pretty much all season. So the Pirates doing very well in that department also. 33 come-from-behind victories is nothing to slouch away from, because that means your young guys are fighting for victories and they're coming back in games that, again, they should have really no business winning. The Brewers, by the way, who had a chance in this series to separate from the Chicago Cubs in the NL Central. It looked like they were going to be able to do so early on yesterday, But with the series lost, the Milwaukee Brewers now only hold a 1.5 game lead on the Chicago Cubs after this series loss. The Cincinnati Reds are about 5.5 games back, so that's more of a afterthought in terms of the Reds winning the division. But the Chicago Cubs now are in a position to fight down the stretch with the Milwaukee Brewers, and it makes for an interesting series to end the season because their final series of the year is against Chicago. So the Pirates played spoiler here because that series could very well decide the NL Central, and if things play out a certain way, it could really decide if you make the playoffs or not. And that's a scary thought if you're the Milwaukee Brewers or the Chicago Cubs. Of course, the Cubs right now in that crazy NL Central wildcard race, and the Milwaukee Brewers just holding on to the division lead. As for Pittsburgh against Milwaukee, they end the series against Milwaukee 5-8 with a negative 22 run differential. I don't think that run differential speaks too much to a lot of the competitive baseball that we saw the Pirates play against Milwaukee this year. Of course, we remember the Carlos Santana walk-off on Apple TV on that Friday night baseball game. That was very fun. We remember them going into Milwaukee and having issues in Milwaukee like they always have historically. They had some good moments at home against the Milwaukee Brewers, but they end the season 5-8. And the Pirates have not finished with a positive record against Milwaukee since 2018, which is not surprising in any rate, seeing as that's basically when the rebuild started. And the Brewers have been a pretty consistent baseball team since that time period. In that year in 2018, by the way, they went 12-7 against the Milwaukee Brewers. So it's been a minute since the Pirates have had a positive winning record against the Milwaukee Brewers. And that's something that's going to need to be improved on, especially starting next year. As you guys have heard me say countless times, that I expect next year to be the year that the Pirates compete in the NL Central. But the Brewers were included in the top 5 farm systems via MLB.com. And we remember 4 of the 5 NL Central teams were in that mix. Of course, it was Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Milwaukee. So the Brewers are still going to be a problem. You saw some of their young players play well in this series too, with specifically a Sal Frelick, who had a pretty solid series and has had a pretty good start to his MLB career. So the Pirates are going to have to fight down the stretch against teams like Milwaukee. And I've said it and tweeted it out over at Locked On Pirates that playing potential playoff teams hard is going to define how the Pirates season ends. And with that said, they still have series against Atlanta. They still have a series against the Cubs. They have a series against the Reds, a series against the Phillies, and a series against the Marlins. So that's 15 of their final 22 games against perennial playoff teams. I think 16 actually, because I think one of those series is a 4-game series. But those games are games where you want to see this young core continue to fight down the stretch. You want to see them do what they did against Milwaukee and potentially win a series or 2 out of that those 5 series. That would be very fun also. But we'll see. If they could play at least 500 baseball or around 500 baseball against those teams, I consider that a win as well. Because the Pirates right now are running without Oneil Cruz, without Henry Davis, and basically a 2-man pitching staff. Yet they've won a lot of games in their past 45. They've been winners of 24 of their past 45 games, or 24-21 in their last 45 with all of this going on. And I think that speaks in large part to Derek Shelton. I think he's done a good job down the stretch of the season, and he'll have to do a very good job this weekend as the Pirates are off today and head to Atlanta for a 3-game series this weekend. But more on that tomorrow. And before we get into Oneil Cruz starting his running program again, a word from our sponsors. Loyal third segment listeners, thank you for tuning in to the third and final segment of today's episode here on September 7th, 2023 on the Locked On Pirates podcast. And Oneil Cruz has started a running program again. We remember on August 23rd, he was shut down again due to soreness in his ankle. And Oneil Cruz, of course, has been sidelined since April 9th. We all remember the play with Sebi Zavala at home plate when his awkward slide resulted in the fractured bone that has kept him out all season. And it stings, by the way, that Cruz has missed practically an entire season because for me and a lot of you who listen to the show, we were expecting Oneil Cruz to take that next step and become a budding star. We have not seen that, obviously, because he has not been able to play. Now, it is interesting that he is starting a running program again, because this is a good sign that the soreness may have gone away. And per Todd Tomczyk, Cruz is running 30-yard striders right now in the outfield grass. But the team, of course, has expectations for Cruz to do more before beginning a rehab assignment. With the schedule and where we're at September 7th, don't expect Cruz back this year. I don't think he's going to even have a rehab assignment in the minors. I just don't think we see it. I think they should honestly just let him do these running drills and do everything that he's doing and just leave it at that. Let him have a full recovery off season. Let him come into spring training 100% healthy, work with him on what he needs to work on, and let him have his breakout in 2024. I think that's the best schedule for Oneil Cruz. And it's unfortunate, again, that we're not getting to see him play and see him improve on the baseball field. He had a good start to the year. We all remember the home run off of Hunter Green on opening day. He was having a pretty good start to the year outside of that as well. But it's a lost season, and it is what it is. And now that the season is running out, obviously Cruz will probably not be returning to action whatsoever, but the Arizona Fall League is an option for Oneil Cruz if he decides that he wants to at least get some game action over the offseason. Now, of course, the Pirates, if they do allow him to play in the Arizona Fall League, are going to monitor his play no matter what. That's just something that we have to expect from the team, because they're going to make sure that Oneil Cruz comes to 2024 spring training completely healthy. You would expect nothing less. I mean, Oneil Cruz is one of the biggest parts of this team, and one of the biggest reasons why, if he stays healthy in 2024, that I think this team can compete for a division title. It's just truthfully, he is arguably as important as Ke'Bryan Hayes and Brian Reynolds are to this team, if not more. And obviously, it has been a positive that the Pirates have done particularly well without Cruz this season. Obviously, I think if they have Oneil Cruz all year, I think the conversation we're having about the Pittsburgh Pirates is completely different after beating the Milwaukee Brewers 2 out of 3 games. But here we are. And right now, I mean, again, you guys heard me mention they're 24-21 in their last 45 games, and that's without Oneil Cruz, without Henry Davis, without a full pitching staff, now without Andrew McCutchen. And a lot of that, again, has been a credit to Ke'Bryan Hayes, who's had just a phenomenal final 2 months of the season. And another positive that came out of Cruz's absence was the fact that we're opening the door to guys like Leo Piguero, G1 Bay, Nick Gonzalez, Alika Williams, Jared Triolo. All these guys got opportunities due to the injury of Oneil Cruz, and otherwise we probably wouldn't have seen them really at all. I mean, we would have saw them, I think. I think Piguero was ready to come up. I think Gonzalez was rushed a little bit because of this Oneil Cruz injury. So the sample sizes we would have saw these guys in would have been much shorter and much smaller. But I do think that getting eyes on these guys and trying to figure out some things in the middle infield and who you want in that middle infield is a big reason why Oneil Cruz's injury, despite it being a complete negative for the team overall, positively impacted the team, because it gave them some answers on some of these guys, which is what you were looking for this year too, is a lot of these questions to get answered. The expectation, by the way, for next season, I would say, is to have Cruz healthy entering spring training and be the everyday shortstop. I would expect nothing less, making the middle infield logjam that much more interesting. But obviously, over the rest of the offseason, we'll talk about that some more. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything the Pittsburgh Pirates do for the remainder of 2023. Thank you guys so much. Follow on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, comment on YouTube, and subscribe on all of your other podcast platforms. We're everywhere. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Enjoy the Pirates off day and enjoy the kickoff to the NFL season. Check out Locked On Steelers for all of your news on the Steelers going into their matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. But with that said, guys, my name is Ethan Smith, and I will see you on the flip side.